Okay, I'm going to take its word for it that it's there. So one more time, just so everybody can hear it, now that I had to restart or resume the stream, however you want to call it. This is Shanth Enjeti of Shanth Enjeti Art. I'm working on a piece of artwork that is for book 2 of my art book. If you're interested in picking it up, there's a link in the description, and I sure would appreciate it. Just wrapping up the last couple pieces of artwork, and this one right here, this piece that I'm working on is, let me move that over just a little bit so that you guys can, let me see if I can move this forward too as well, see how that goes. Cause a little bit of a camera shake there, but might make it a little bit easier for me in terms of reaching everything. There we go. Move my mic out. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Hope everybody's having as pleasant of an evening as they possibly can. If you have any questions about my process or anything going on, I'll be trying to keep an eye on the chat. There we go. There we go. Make some lightning happen here. If there is one bit of advice I could give to the Kong v Godzilla movie that keeps getting pushed back that they're working on, it would be, for heaven's sake, give Kong lightning power. Don't give him a weapon. It's weird. Let's see here. There we go. There's a little bit more power right there. Just kind of move that through. Got a couple of different paintings going at the moment, and I might give you guys a little peek at those depending on how long I'm able to keep this up. It's pretty late here. Or I should say it's pretty early. It's 2 in the morning. But I've been working on this stuff all day, getting my setup figured out. Have a new audio setup happening right here, and pretty happy with it so far. Picks up a little less background noise. It's a little bit clearer to hear, but you guys can be the judges of that. And let's see here. And what do we want to do? Let's take a look and see what else we have to do on this thing here. Okay, so I've got, let's see here. I realize I have to move it over a little bit more. Move this back right over there. Let's see what we have. There we go. And then there's Godzilla. So let's get to work right here on doing a little bit more detailing right there. There we go. Let's see here, right there. Good. Just making sure it's not out of frame. That happens sometimes. think that's sorting out a little bit. Let's move a little closer. See if I can still fit in there to paint. Let me move this out here. Move my audio. There we go. Make it a little bit easier for me to get in here. If I mix up enough paint, I don't have to reload my brush as much. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to learn how to create or mix up enough paint and what viscosity that you're going to need it to be in so that you don't have to reload every 5 seconds. Particularly if you're painting in a bit of a tight spot like I am right now. Don't have to go back there and go, okay, I'm running out of paint. It means you've probably mixed it too dry, particularly if you're trying to cover a lot of ground. So this is me using a number 3 Princeton Elite synthetic brush. It's not a super expensive brush. It's not a super cheap brush, but it's definitely not a sable brush in terms of its price. It's synthetic. And it will hold the water really well, and it will make for a little bit of a smoother process when I'm painting. And right now what I'm trying to create is the illusion of light kind of coming off this lightning that's going and illuminating things. And I have to be careful because if I make where the light hits as bright as the light itself, it will take away the contrast that I need. So I'm always walking a fine line here as I do this stuff. There you go. See if I can make this happen here. Get a little more contrast. Right there. And right there. There we go. Starting to come together. Hopefully. Whoops. Sorry about that, folks. It's a tight squeeze in here. You can see behind me my Dave Stevens Rocketeer movie poster. I love that movie, and I wanted to, and I'm going to start doing some more stuff here, but this is my workspace, but it's also my living room. So one of the things that I'm always going to be, that I've been kind of chewing over is, do I want to turn this corner into a setup? Now, my wife and I are both artists, and I looked around the room and I had this realization that my wife has her workspace and her desk over there. She's a painter. This painting right over there, right behind me, is one of her paintings that's available on West Elm. And she's a fantastic artist and teacher in her own right. And the thing is that I looked around the room and I went, hey, she's got about 3 out of the 4 corners in here for workspace. So I realized, and she was more than okay with it, but it made me laugh. And I was like, I think it's okay for me to take this corner and make it into a art studio set, particularly because I'm going to be doing more of this. Of all the different forms of social media that exist at this moment, and I hate to use that term per se, but of all of the different platforms, I don't know which expression I like, if I like any, but of all of the different opportunities, we'll try that one, that there are for us to get our work out there as artists, this seems to be the most highly effective. This seems to be the one that translates into people getting genuinely interested in your work and supporting and backing your work. I've done streams where I just talk about my Indiegogo, and the link is in the description, while I paint, and have picked up more sales of my second art book than I have by posting about it on Instagram. And I just think it's the nature of the YouTube audience. And a lot of the YouTubers that I follow have made some really good points about that you really kind of have to put yourself out there. Whether you're an introvert or not, and I was talking about that earlier today, it does not matter. If you want to get your work out there, you need to promote it. You need to be excited about it. You need to tell people about it. And that's one of the things I've been really enjoying about doing these videos. And I've been away for a little bit because I've been trying to get stuff set up and trying to get more work done, but I'm hoping I'm going to be able to do this more regularly. I have a brand new audio set up, and that's working really well, so we'll see where that goes. Yeah, it's looking good. It's getting there. Okay, so when I put those highlights in on the chest, one of the things that seems to have happened is I lost the chroma. I lost the color on it. How do I word it? I lost the brightness on it, and I want to make it a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to wash in a little bit of a blue-green to where I put those highlights, just to give it a little bit more punch, because I don't want it to be as white as the lightning is. I want it to be a little bit darker, and that just gives it that little extra kick right there. And then I can step it up a little bit and bring more white into that color, but I'm not going to overstate it. And this was influenced by a beautiful, beautiful model statue of a gorilla that you can get on BigBadToyStore.com. It's an exclusive put out by Rebor, and I love what Rebor does. Rebor creates some of the coolest stuff and some of the most affordable stuff. I don't know how they do it. They're out of the UK. And they have a gorilla that they've just done that's inspired by or I should say is created by one of the best gorilla sculptors out there, gorilla artists. And I can't really pronounce his name. I think it's, I'm going to do my best, Tomek Radzi, can't pronounce it, sculpt. But he's an amazing artist, European artist. And they hired him, one of the best gorilla artists out there. He's a sculptor. And they hired him to do a sculpture of a gorilla that they call Gorilla Z, Rebor's Gorilla Z. And one of the color variants you can get at Big Bad Toy Store is a dark kind of blue, but a really saturated blue. And it's got orange fur. Now, I'm probably going to be buying one of the more Kong colored ones. I'm going to be buying for my studio mate brother, Nick. And then I'm also going to be getting myself one, and I've already pre-ordered the orange and blue one because it's the first one to come up for pre-order. I just saw the color, and I instantly loved it because orange and blue are my two favorite colors. And, yeah, just an amazing job that they do over at Rebor. Really love their stuff. and really love Tomek's artwork. Just a great artist and huge inspiration for me. It's interesting. I think a lot of the artwork that I get influenced by these days, whether it's Simon Lee, Spider Zero, or gosh, who else is there that I'm really into right now? But they tend to be 3D artists. The stuff that Sideshow does is great. Love their stuff. My friend Cameron Scott Davis, who's going to be writing the introduction for book 2, which is what this artwork is for, is he's done some work for Sideshow. He's got some DC Comics characters and DC Comics. What are they? What I refer to them as? Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn in his art style that they're releasing as figures. And so if you haven't been by and seen Sideshow Collectibles release of Cameron's stuff, go check it out. Cameron's an awesome artist and friend. And it's really great that he's doing the introduction to book 2, because he was sort of... of all the people that I know who've done crowdfunding, Cameron is probably... well, it's not even probably. There's no probably about it. Of all the people I know who have done crowdfunding projects, Cameron is the one who inspired me to do it by getting me on Indiegogo and working with him on his own personal project, Sleepwalker. He asked me to work with him on the story a bit, which I did for a little while, and I also did some video game concept art with him this year as well. But he really is responsible for getting me out there and doing this stuff and kind of, doing my initial social media work on Instagram and posting stuff, and it just went haywire from there. So I'm really grateful to Cameron for that, and it's just amazing. I've been at this for... Oh gosh, I've been making artwork for as long as I can remember, as long as I could hold a pencil or a pen. I've been teaching art at the college level for 16 years and did my first professional job when I was 17, and it just continues to be and it just one of those things that I can't live without, and I never know what direction it's going to go in. I just work to improve my stuff every single day. I don't give myself permission to stop studying life and to stop, working on improving my stuff. I wasn't one of those people, and I probably never will be, who just wants to fall into a stylistic and avoid the study aspect of it, because I don't enjoy that aspect of it. I don't enjoy not studying. It's annoying to me. And it doesn't mean I'm going for realism, but I study realism and representational work all the time. I don't think it's antithetical to doing more stylized work. In fact, I think it kind of feeds that stuff. When I'm painting this gorilla, I'm not thinking of a painting of a gorilla, or I'm not thinking about an old painting I did of a gorilla or my style. I'm thinking of a gorilla. I'm thinking of a creature. I'm thinking of the way light hits it. I'm thinking of musculature. And that's a huge part of what I do. Huge part. Let's see if I can move that down a bit. There we go. Let's move that over so we can see what we're up to. There you go. And so, yeah, I can't imagine ever taking my foot off the gas on study. I've actually picked up some anatomy books to study this summer, because anytime I find someone who can explain it better, I'm always going to go after that and try to find it. Because when I was in art college, the biggest thing that was frustrating about it was the fact that so many of the shorthand and the approaches to doing representational anatomy had been kind of thrown out in favor of the postmodernist mentality of deconstructing things, having everything being conceptual, and also what C.S. Lewis referred to as the poison of subjectivity, which is to say quality being relative. And I mean, this isn't a new concept as far as things that people discuss about art school. I mean, Art School Confidential is one of the the movie and or the comic, but I think the movie is definitely in there, is one of the most stinging kind of critiques of that mentality, that sort of is so pervasive. And I went off to art school, definitely interested in learning how to do representational work. And looking back on my experience there, I had a couple of teachers who kind of, it gave us a little bit of a glimpse of that, talking about names of muscles. But when it comes to the kind of drawing where you have just a mastery of it that's developed from, studying models and studying, and I don't mean, when I say models, I don't mean actual models. I mean models for how to approach models, systems for how to approach models, because I think that to do so is antithetical to the postmodernist view of art, which is weirdly all about systems of how you have to approach your artwork. But it's very anti-systems in the old ways. It's basically, let's get you out of that old way of thinking, that prison of the old way of thinking, and get you into the new prison of, Clement Greenberg and all of that business, which I studied when I got my master's degree. And it's created certain cliches of response and certain habits in how people draw or don't draw well. And I think as an artist, I've worked, and I've always worked to try to master those things, and it's becoming easier and easier these days to, if you've got work ethic, to study and improve. And when someone takes a class with me, I don't come from a place of postmodernism at all. I come from a place of actually giving them skills so they can make up their own mind on what they want to do. That's what interests me. I like that. I think it's got a nice kind of feel to it with that highlight. It's going to color shift a bit in a second, so it's not going to stay there with that real intensity that it has right now. As it dries, gouache will color shift, but I wanted to bring in some of that contrast right there. Now I'm going to put in a little bit more right up here. See what that just did? Just brought that forward. I really do admire a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing. I think it's I think it's a global movement. I wouldn't say that it's coming out of one particular country. It's coming out of the online community, in my opinion. But there's been a real push of a return to the lessons that the masters figured out as far as how to understand perspective, how to understand value, how to create work that is highly proficient, and how to expand your visual vocabulary in such a way that you can say more complicated things. I think right now we're having a lot of, as artists, we're encouraged to have a lot of intense emotions, but articulating them in the form of the visual equivalency of grunts and just these inarticulate sounds, so to speak. And I don't care for that at all. It doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me in the slightest to spend my days and my time making my artwork communicating with a vocabulary of 3 or 4 words and a couple of sounds. I want the entire dictionary, or as much of it as I can put into my stuff. And I find it incredibly strange to think about starting one's education as an artist and having it be about what you're not going to learn and what things you're going to avoid learning. It's ridiculous to me. And it's something that's really been on my mind lately, is the attitude of thinking that you don't need to learn a lot when you enter college, and thinking that you don't need to, and not even just college, but when you enter your 20s, that you have no obligation to learn, because, you know, all you have to do is refine the little knowledge you have. And I was, like most people in their 20s when I was 20. I didn't know a lot, but I knew it. I knew I didn't know a lot. And I was interested in learning more. And it's the interesting thing is it doesn't hurt me or anyone else for people to think they know everything when they're a young artist at all. That's the crazy thing about it. It actually hurts the people who think that, because they never really get good. So in a lot of ways, when I talk about those kinds of things with my students, it's like throwing someone a life preserver. If you throw someone who's out in the ocean and drowning a life preserver and they bat it away, I mean, what can you do? And the internet is one of the greatest, and all these YouTube videos that are available are some of the greatest life preservers that have ever been thrown to the next generation of artists. But depending on who you listen to, you can just kind of wallow in the decadence of just applauding yourself for being mediocre, and it's weird. And I don't think of myself as being the greatest artist by any stretch. But I don't. I've seen too much amazing work out there, and I've also been taught by, or mentored by people like Brian Stelfreeze, or I have friends who are quite successful in their careers, who I deeply respect as individuals, and I don't ever want to give myself the luxury of not continuing to learn, which to me, I mean, honestly, it doesn't sound like a luxury to me. It sounds like a prison, but it's not enough for the people who buy my books and who buy book 2 to see me taking it easy and not putting just as much into book 2 as I put into book 1. That's just not at all something I have interest in. I want people to get it and go, oh, wow, I can see where he's kind of stepping things up a little bit here and trying new things here. It's not going to be a repeat. I don't know what the purpose would be if it was a repeat. And it's not the kind of work I want to do. I remember, I've been a fan of so many artists. Todd McFarlane was one of my first ones, but one of the people I got into big time in college and who will forever affect my work in ways that I don't perceive, but other people will perceive, is an artist by the name of Jean Giraud, Mobius, who passed away a couple of years ago. And every year of that guy's work, he stepped it up. He improved. He was doing something new. I mean, it was just astounding. He was working on a Cintiq and doing all of his work in digital by the time he passed away in his 70s. And I mean, it was good as anyone else's stuff. His work is still inspiring, video games, and he's an incredible artist. That's the stuff. There you go. Drinking my daughter's drinks in the fridge because mine are out. So hopefully she won't see this later and get angry. You never know. Teenagers are funny that way. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that some of my so I guess I can say that some of my favorite students are not the people that I've taught that started out at the top of their game. They were just like, all right, here I am, I'm amazing. Some of my students some of the students who have inspired me the most are people who started out not knowing how to do a lot of stuff and did the work. And it's really frustrating, and deservedly so, to artists who've decided that they have their thing in high school and come off to college. And I don't know why one would do so if you weren't going to change your work any. Not even change. Change is a bad word. Because that's what some people will. One of my favorite things I like to say is that there are some people who think that getting out of your comfort zone means forcing you to climb into theirs, which I'm not a big fan of in general. I don't really have a comfort zone when it comes to my work. I have a comfort zone when it comes to my living room. But it's a fascinating thing to me that, you know, that an artist would come off and not want to learn how to get better. I mean, if you're in your 40s, which I am, and again, if you're just tuning in, anybody, my name is Shanth Enjeti, and this is Shanth Enjeti Art, and this is artwork for book 2 of my book collections. I've got a copy of book 1 right here, so you can see what we're talking about here. Here it is. There we go. And it is a collection of some of my work right there. And where was I with that? But anybody tuning in, that's what my work looks like, and there's a link in the description to book 2. But when I'm looking at my artwork and the stuff that inspires me, and the artists that inspire me, and the students that inspire me, my attitude is, I know where I was going now. My attitude is this. Okay, I'm 43 years old. When you see me paint, this right here should look like 43 years of learning. And I don't want to think that someone would look at my stuff when I was in my 20s and have it not reflect 20 years of learning, 20 years of discipline and dedication. So when you buy my book, you're not buying a couple of months of artwork or a year of artwork. You're buying 43 years of knowledge. And that should be on the page. That's what you should see. And you don't want to see somebody who's in their 40s acting like they're 20. And you don't want to see an artist who's in their 40s painting like they did when they were 20. Or painting like they're doing a high school art project. That's just not how it is. You just don't want that. Or at least no one wants to pay for that. And when I look at some of my favorite storytellers and filmmakers, whether it's George Lucas, Akira Kurosawa, Steven Spielberg, I see, for the most part, I see their work progressing over their careers. To me, speaking of George Lucas, who I'm a huge fan of George Lucas as an artist, when people say to me, what's your favorite trilogy? I always tell people my favorite George Lucas trilogy is his first 3 movies. That's if you want to understand how great of an artist George Lucas is, skip, or you don't have to skip, but do not skip his first 3 movies, which is THX 1138, American Graffiti, and the original Star Wars movie. You will realize how great of an artist he was. His first 3 movies redefined how we do certain things in cinema and how we do certain things in storytelling. And then you get to somebody, his buddy, you want to talk about amazing generation, 2 of his buddies, Francis Ford Coppola and Steven Spielberg, and you look at what they did, and between just a handful of artists like them, they redefined cinema for a couple of decades. And they did it by studying people and having certain master filmmakers that inspired them, one of whom was Akira Kurosawa. And so those artists, the trick to trying to figure out if someone was a great artist or if somebody was a flash in the pan as an artist is you look at their work and see if they've created a body of artwork that has grown over time. And there are some filmmakers who have like a short period of, oh, wow, that's kind of impressive, and they disappear. And great filmmakers and great artists don't need somebody else's story to tell. They tell their own stories. And they create really great original artwork. I think we've got a couple of decent people working right now, but it's a little too soon to tell. I think Quentin Tarantino is a master filmmaker for sure. I think he's great. It's interesting. I don't know if I own any of his movies on Blu-ray because they're a pretty tough watch in a lot of cases. With all due respect, I mean, The Hateful Eight was rough. That was a rough movie to watch. But Quentin Tarantino, I saw his work with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, and Jackie Brown, obviously, and let me think. I think if I'm talking about my favorite movies, that would be Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, and Reservoir Dogs. Those are my... I might be leaving one of my favorites out, but I'm pretty sure that's a pretty accurate statement right there. And I love the stuff that he's done, but more importantly, even when I don't get into his new films as much, I know they're great. I know they're good because he actually cares about the stuff. He actually studies. And the same thing goes with George Lucas. When George Lucas makes a film and people don't like it, it doesn't mean that they have to like it, that it's a great film. But every time he makes work, you learn something about his process, like Kurosawa. There are people who hated and put down movies like Kagemusha or Dodescadan, I'm pronouncing it probably wrong, Dreams, or Matadayo. But you learn something from Kurosawa every single time he made a film. And actually, I think that was George Lucas's reason for using the sequel rights to Star Wars to help Kurosawa fund his later films. Is he said, we have to help this guy make films because every time he makes films, we learn something from him. He's that important of a filmmaker. And I think that's true. That's been true for George Lucas. I think that's been true for Steven Spielberg. I think Saving Private Ryan, I know it was just the anniversary of the Normandy invasion. I think it was last week, where America basically began the campaign to liberate Europe from Nazi Germany. And he made one of the definitive World War II movies of all time. Schindler's List, I think it goes without saying. I just bought that on Blu-ray. One of the greatest works of American cinema, period. It's up there with Attenborough's, David Lean's work and Attenborough's Gandhi, I think. And just an incredible... John Williams hit it out of the park with that soundtrack. Just absolutely love it. There we go. Starting to come together, I think. Am I painting off frame? I'm not sure. I'd be painting off frame. Talking about movies does that. Let's see here. Let's put it right about there. There we go. And I'll move it over just a bit so we can see that a little bit more clearly. There we go. But I'm a massive Steven Spielberg fan. E.T.'s a masterpiece. I think Close Encounters of the Third Kind might be one of... I think, frankly, it's one of the great Steven Spielberg auteur works. It's what Douglas Trumbull did. I believe it was Douglas Trumbull who did the special effects for Close Encounters. Again, John Williams with the score. But I can name at least 6 Steven Spielberg films that are classics. And let me think. I'm trying to think if there's a particular... I think Saving Private Ryan and some of his late works in E.T. definitely changed the linguistics of cinema. But there's certain aspects of his directing that I'd have to give credit to Alfred Hitchcock. And I love Spielberg. I mean, I'm absolutely a child of Spielberg. There's no... not in terms of paternity, but if someone can prove that, I'd be happy to claim Spielberg as a part of my heritage. But I'm definitely a child of Steven Spielberg in terms of his work, but I think that Hitchcock linguistically is responsible for so much. But think about it. Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., and Raiders of the Lost Ark involved George Lucas. The character came out of George Lucas's imagination. George Lucas has 3 or 4 films that changed cinema. Francis Ford Coppola has 3 or 4 films that changed cinema. I don't think that there are a lot of directors today where you could make that case. One of my YouTube buddies Michael of The Choice Voice recently watched, I think for the first time, watched Apocalypse Now. And Apocalypse Now is Francis Ford Coppola's Vietnam film. And that changed cinema. That changed the way that, I mean, so many quotes from that movie are iconic. And Michael just watched it, I think, for the first time. And just released a video review of it, which I have not had a chance to check out yet. I don't know how he felt about it, whether he liked it or not. I think he said it's a classic, and he views it as a classic. I don't know if it's personally a film that resonates with him on that level, but it might very well. But I'll have to check it out and see what he makes of it. Michael over on The Choice Voice. Check him out if you haven't yet. And there's a couple of YouTubers I always feel like I want to shout out because they're just great. And one of them is Leslie P. Chambers. Leslie does some really great stuff. I think some of the best film reviewers and most interesting takes on things. So I'm laughing thinking about some of the people I follow. And their takes on things can be hilarious. But I just get so much from my artist brothers and some of the people who really have taken the time to look at movies, look at pop culture, and discuss it in an intelligent way. One of the most frustrating things in the world, if you're passionate about something, is hearing people who are completely incurious about it try to go in depth on it. You just think, oh my goodness. Let's see if I can find my pen here. A kind of left field recommendation, if you want to see someone who goes in depth into something, but who I'm a big fan of, is Michael French, and his channel is Retro Blasting. And he talks about vintage toys, but his background is in film and cinema. And every now and again, he does a video where he gives his thoughts on cinema and pop culture. And he is a very well-informed, very well-read artist and thinker when he talks about his stuff coming out of production. And he is an amazing critic when he talks about the toy industry, talks about... He's interesting. He's a philosophical, deeply philosophical guy when it comes to that stuff. And to see him bring to bear his considerable knowledge and his passion for what he talks about is inspiring. He's one of those people that if I was talking with him about the subject of vintage toys, I would probably be asking him questions. But I wouldn't know what to say, to be honest with you, because he just has so much knowledge. I'd think, oh man, I'm probably going to say something pretty stupid right now. But I love watching his channel because I just learn a ton. He's curious and he does not stop. He's relentless in his pursuit of information about how things work and the history of this stuff. And he keeps it all in his head, and him and Melinda have a really great channel in Retro Blasting. Love that channel. Michael was talking the other day about someone who had done a custom scaled up Cylon toy. I didn't know that they even made original Battlestar Galactica toys from the 70s. And it made me think of one of my formative experiences that it captured everything in one family trip that I took as a kid. And it was to Universal Studios, California. And we saw the Universal Monster Show. where they had a guy come out in the Lou Ferrigno Hulk makeup, and they had a Battlestar Galactica ride. You can still see it on YouTube what it was. And seeing that Battlestar Galactica sort of segment of the backlot tour and seeing the Cylons, I mean, it was like being... I was a Star Wars kid, and I hadn't ever seen the show Battlestar Galactica. We didn't watch that show in my household, but that was my only experience with it. So hearing Michael talk about it was pretty cool, and him talking about, his connection with that. But, I mean, he had this really funny bit where he was critiquing a so-called professional movie reviewer's review, where the movie reviewer had said that George Lucas was inspired by John Hughes Westerns. And I caught it right when he said it, and I just started laughing. But John Hughes never directed Westerns. he's the director of The Breakfast Club. And it just killed me. It just was hilarious to see Michael just go, "You're a professional reviewer, and you don't know that." And I make plenty of mistakes when I'm talking off the cuff like this. But that's ridiculous. And it just made me laugh because I love movies too, and it's just ridiculous to hear people. Usually, when people point out things that they think that George Lucas was, or they're trying to undermine, and downplay how impressive of an artist George Lucas has been, and the fact that he created Star Wars. And they try to act like people who just rehash what he does are he did the same thing. And it's like, no, George Lucas wasn't Akira Kurosawa, and the average filmmaker isn't George Lucas. It's just not how it works. And you can defend work without dragging down another artist who's a master. Kurosawa's a master. Jack Kirby's a master artist. That's all there is to it. Mary Blair was a master artist, and her work is still influencing animation design today. Eiko Ishioka was an incredible artist. Her stuff has been influencing costume design and fashion design. And Edith Head is one of the most amazing costume designers of all time. Also holds the record for the most Oscars, I believe, earned by a single individual for her costume design in Alfred Hitchcock films and everything else. And I can think of artist after artist with an impressive legacy. And if you want to ignore that, you can do it. But, you're a fool. Sorry if I'm a little bit punchy about this stuff lately, but I'm really getting sick of the putting down of great works of art so that unskilled people can feel better. It's not my bag. I can get up in the morning and work really hard to improve, knowing there's certain artists I'm never going to be able to catch. That's fine. Genius illuminates the world, and it should be appreciated by anybody with half a brain. Some of the work I've been watching lately and been hugely inspired by is the work of Arthur Conan Doyle. I've been listening to Hound of the Baskervilles on repeat. It's influencing a piece I'm working on right now that's going to be in book 2. Book 2, folks, link in the description if you haven't had a chance to back the book yet. Actually, it's already funded. It's available in demand, but this is right here a work of art that's going to be in the book, and it gives you a sense of what I like to do when I'm hand lettering and when I'm putting stuff together. There's a painting right there of 2 portraits. One of them is influenced by Wesley Snipes. I'm a massive Wesley Snipes fan. Massive fan of the Blade movies and a massive fan of Sherlock Holmes. And that's Peter Cushing, who a lot of people know only as Governor Tarkin from the original Star Wars movies, but he's a Hammer horror star, and he starred in the Hound of the Baskervilles adaptation by Hammer Films. And he was a fantastic Holmes. He looks exactly like the original drawings. He's one of the best Sherlock Holmes. He has one of the most accurate looks of what Sherlock Holmes is supposed to look like. So this is what the stuff that I do looks like. And so all of this that I'm doing right now with my work to bring it to the next stage it's going to be to, or go to, I should say, in my work is about that constant study. So if you want to be an artist, if you're interested in being an artist and you're interested in improving your work and you're watching this, go out and study the masters and ask people who are confident and who are successful and who are capable who those masters are. Look at the great works of film. Don't worry about what they're doing wrong or how you could do it better. Look at the great works of film and acknowledge that they're masterpieces, and that's why they've stood the test of time. And don't toss them out because they're not in fashion with right now. Masterpieces don't just come and go. They're always going to be important to some degree, and the fashion of what's in style right now will come and go. It goes in about 10 or 15 years. And that's it. 20 or 30 or 40 years, it's wiped out. That's just how it is. So keep working, keep striving. I'm going to do more of these live streams. And thanks for coming out, taking a look at this stuff. And check out my Indiegogo. It's links in the description. And I appreciate your support if you've already backed the book. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a good evening. And yeah, stay safe out there. Take care, folks. Talk to you later.